Hey guys, Ricky here with the Backpacking Scouter. For those of you that have been following us for the past 30 days or so, you know that Liam and I completed the Colorado Trail. We actually got off the trail. It'll be a couple weeks here tomorrow since we've gotten off the trail. Managed to come home, shave up a little bit so that my wife would still kiss me, and started to kind of relax a little bit and kind of recover from some of the trail. But I wanted to take some time while things were still fresh on my mind to really share with you guys some of the lessons that we learned along the way. Over the last year or so, I've spent a lot of time researching and planning and doing a lot of information, as you saw in some of the other videos, about getting ready for the Colorado Trail. And then too, wanted to share with some of you guys the lessons that we learned while we were out on the trail. Spent a good bit of time out there getting ready for things and learned some lessons that, some challenges that we might have had along the way. So my hopes here is to share some information with you so that if you're getting ready to get out on the trail yourself, or you just are thinking about getting out on the trail, that maybe some of these tips can help you as you're starting to do some of your planning. Whether you're thinking about getting on the trail next year or you're getting on in a week or two. All of these are things that definitely could help you along the way. So to kind of recap, for those of you that may have not been watching us along the way, we started, so Liam and I, based off of some limitations I had with time and the amount of time I could take off of work, we started off and we did the first segments of 1 through 5 as some weekenders and some shakedowns in order to kind of better test ourselves and stuff and get ready and to help with some of the timing. And so therefore we started our trek, our through hike at Kenosha Pass, which is about 70 miles or so in, and that's the start of segment 6. And we then finished from there. We went 23 days on the trail. And finished the trail. So total in, we had about 28 days counting the weekends that we had on trail. So to start off telling you some of the lessons that we've learned, we've broken it down into 5 categories. And so the first category is pre-planning. So as I mentioned, I spent a lot of the last year researching, reading up on, watching videos, and really just kind of building a plan for the trail. For me, I've got 30 plus years of backpacking experience, tons of experience out on the trail, but lots of weekend trips, maybe an occasional 4 or 5 day trip here or there. And then before now, the longest trip that I'd ever done was Liam and I did Philmont down in New Mexico for 8 days 2 years ago. So a lot of experience backpacking, but not a lot of experience through hiking. So I was really curious to know, what are the things that I don't know? And so I did a lot of, research over the last year. So I started off, I was watching tons of YouTube videos, gaining information from other folks who have done through hikes, whether it's gear prep or other things, planning and stuff for that. And then I also purchased 2 of the books from the Colorado Trail Foundation, the data book and the handbook. Both of those were very, instrumental, I think, in helping me learn a lot of the stuff that I needed to learn along the way. There's a lot of history in them, a lot of information about each of the segments for that as well. And then I also purchased the Far Out app. Well, not the app itself, but you actually have in-app purchases where you purchase the trail. So I purchased the Colorado Trail in there. I had not previously had much experience with the Far Out app at all. In my previous years, because they don't really have a lot of information on a lot of the other trails that you might have out there, but they really do focus a lot on some of the longer trails and more popular trails. So if you're through hiking, man, it's really worth it. I definitely highly recommend getting the Far Out app, because it was just instrumental in not only my pre-planning, but also planning along the way on the trail, and then also, as we were going along on the trail. The app's just amazing at being able to help you, pick out potential routes for each day. It helps you get see what the elevation gain and loss, would be for the days, to help you look and get an idea of what you might have looking at. That's really, really good at telling you where the water sources are. So when you're out camping, a lot of your goals are planned around water. You want to try to take lunches around water. You want to take, if you can, you want to camp near water. It keeps you from having to, carry it, with you for dry camping and other stuff. So the app was just amazing at really helping pre-plan. So for me, there were a lot of things that I was looking at for trying to pre-plan. One of the reasons why I really got into it is because, myself, like many of you, was very limited in the amount of time that I was going to be able to take. My work is not, they got a culture where they're used to folks maybe taking 2 weeks at most, when they take off. But, luckily I was very lucky that, I've been there for a while. And so they were willing and able to allow me to take some more time off. But to really push it past, the 24 days that I took off was going to be tough. So which is why we kind of split some of our trip up, did a little bit on some weekends, and then did the rest straight through. So that helped me with time. So one of the things that I did in my planning was I built out some itineraries, some draft itineraries. And so, of course, I started off, our ultimate goal was to get on the trail and finish the trail. So I did one itinerary that was based off of the time frame that we had, and built it to see exactly how many miles per day would we have to do to be able to finish. And come to find out, that was going to be a decent amount of mileage. And so after building that one, I built a second one because I really wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do and sustainfully do day after day out on the trail. And so I did do a lot of exercising, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, and other things that, had a general idea of what I could do and what I've done in the past on some of these other trips that I've gone on. But I've never really done anything where I had really long mileage on a regular basis. So I built a second itinerary, which was built out to be a little bit easier of itinerary. So it was kind of my worst case scenario. I'm 44 years old, semi-decent shape. If I can't do the higher mileage that I know we have to do to complete, what's a more reality mileage to do? So I built another one that had an average around 12 miles per day on it, just to kind of see, for me, what would that potentially look like and how far could we get and what would we have left to do if we had to do it again to finish it next year. So built those out to really help do that. That also helped me be able to tell, elevation gains throughout each day. You knew that as you were going to try to build out a day, that if you built it, a little different, or maybe if you added a couple extra miles, instead of being, 4,000 foot of elevation gain for a day, you might be at 6,000 foot, which you might know is a little bit more of a challenge to do in the day. So that really helped me get me a general idea for that. It also helped us with the other big thing that we did in the pre-planning, which was for food prep and resupply. So I chose, of course, there's multiple ways that you can go about doing a through hike. A lot of folks choose to do, and get out on the trail, and that as you start to kind of run low on food, then you just find the next location where you can get off trail and get into a town, and you just maybe hike into a town or even hitch into a town, and then you go find a local store, grocery store, something of that nature, and just go buy what you want, and for however many days you feel like you need. And so some people would do it that way. I chose to do it as we planned out all of our food ahead of time, and then we sent resupply boxes along the way, which is a little easier to do when you're on like the Colorado Trail, because it's not as of a longer term as, say, some of the longer ones like the AT and the Continental Divide Trail, where you're out for like 5 or 6 months. It's a little harder to do on some of those because that's a lot of pre-planning that you'd have to do ahead of time. So, but for us, it worked for me. We took, as you guys know, if you were watching some of the videos, my dog for the first week. And so naturally my wife was going to come and pick up our dog at about day 6. And so it just made sense that she would also bring our first resupply. I also had a neighbor who wanted to come and join us for a couple days and ended up just hanging out for a night. And so that made sense that he could bring a resupply. So I really started planning those around those two that I knew. And then I figured, okay, where's a spot in between both of those where I could look to see where we would potentially need somewhere and what were my options of places to ship to. So we ended up shipping 2 of the boxes of resupplies as well. So having the itinerary built out helped me be able to know what our estimates were, even on the high end and on the low end when we were looking at mileage wise, of where those resupplies might need to take place, so that I could do a little bit of the pre-planning for that. So that was very, very helpful. And like I said, I really utilized the books for the Colorado Trail Foundation and the Far Out app to be able to build those. For those of you that are interested in it, I'm eventually going to get them up on our website at backpackingscouter.com. So look to there here soon, and you'll be able to see. I'll share those spreadsheets that I put together for that, so that you've got something for yourself. As far as for other pre-planning things, we also, as I mentioned, the food. So we built out a food plan. Liam and I have done enough backpacking that we kind of we knew what were the things we liked, what were the kind of foods we were used to on the trail. So we really it was easy to build that. And also I've done a lot of the shakedowns and other things that were getting us ready for Philmont, which meant we bought a lot of food for the big troops. So had a lot of experience with that one. So that one was pretty easy for me to kind of build out what we had for our meal plan and then purchase everything. What I did do, though, I'll share with you, that worked out really nicely for me here was because I had help from my wife being able to provide those resupply boxes, I had to try to make it as simple and as easy for her as I could. And so one of the things that I came up with is that I would just separate one whole day's worth of food and just put it all into a grocery bag and tie it up. And then that way out here, I was able to set things up. I had the boxes all set off and pre-labeled and already wrote on the boxes, hold for CT hiker, estimated date of arrival, this date, and on all of this stuff. So that it was really simple for my wife. And then I had all of the food bags laid out. So I had all of the food for Liam and I both in one bag for one day. So that what I could do is once we got out on the trail and we started realizing what our mileage was going to look like, and we started recognizing, when we thought we were going to get to the different spots, then I could, message my wife using my Garmin and say, put 4 days worth of food in the Mount Princeton Hot Springs box and mail it tomorrow. So it just made it easier for her. So she didn't have to worry, about, what's breakfast, what's lunch, what's dinner, any of those type of things. It was literally go grab 4 grocery bags that are laid out there, pick 4 random ones, toss them in the box, tape it up, take it to UPS and ship it. So it really made it easy for her. So I would definitely recommend, think those kind of things through if you're going to do the shipping of the resupplies. Make it as easy for whoever's helping you out as possible. Not to say that you can't, if you go, hey, I'm absolutely sick and tired of this so-and-so meal, and I know that that's in some of these, so could you replace that with this? You could totally do those things. It just makes it a little bit harder on whoever's supporting and helping you. That's why I think a lot of folks do the supply on the trail, because then as you get tired of things, you can kind of change up your foods as you're buying them in town. So a lot of things there that we learned, in kind of getting prepped and getting ready. But many of the things there, though, just really helped to make it so much easier when we were out on the trail. So category number two of things that we learned was not only getting ready in your preparations, but also getting ready physically. So unless you're maybe, if you're a trail runner or you're an ultra marathon person that maybe trains tons of amount of time, you have to get ready for something like a through hike. I can go out any day of the week and go on a hiking trip or go on a backpacking trip for a weekend. And I've done some pretty extraneous things in my time and didn't really have to train and do for those because was in halfway decent shape for that. But being 44 years old, I knew that the through hike was really going to test me, and especially, about a year or so ago, I'm at that point in my career where I've been there long enough. I'm behind a desk, gained a good decent amount of weight, was at one of my heaviest parts of my life, and knew I'm going to have to get ready and exercise a bit to be able to chase an 18-year-old on the Colorado Trail and to be able to follow my son along the way. So I really put myself on a pretty strenuous diet and an exercise plan to get ready. And so with the use of the diet and the exercise, so about 4 or 5 months before we left to go on the trail, I really started kind of putting myself on that exercise program. And so here's just some of the things that I did, for me. So, I mean, I really just started off in the beginning, just starting to do some regular hikes, which for me, as I mentioned, I wanted to take my dog along the way, which she's still young. She's only a year old. And so I had to start getting her ready for the trail and start training her with trail etiquette and other things and stuff too. So that helped keep me motivated to make sure that I was sticking with my exercise program as well, because I started it kind of at the end of winter and into spring there a little bit. But I just really started off, doing some hikes. Take off and do a hike in the neighborhood, a couple miles, 2 or 3 miles. Whether I'm walking around the neighborhood or just doing in nearby parks. I'd take her with me as well. We slowly, as we would do more, we would add a little bit more mileage. We started adding weight. I would start carrying my backpack. I would start putting her backpack on her. We'd start adding weight to the backpack in time. And we'd start increasing those mileage. So we'd go out, and eventually it got to where we would maybe on a weekend, we'd take off and do a 9 or 10 mile hike. And so, throughout the ways, not only am I checking and making sure, that I'm being able to do it and seeing how my wind is going and other things, but I'm also trying to think about gear and just other things too, and getting my body used to some of that. Testing my boots out, a lot of other things that I was doing. But then I eventually upped my game a little bit more too. So for me, we live in Colorado, and we live here in Conifer, and so we live at around 8,300 foot in elevation, and so elevation is something, and the altitude is something that we're used to a decent amount. And because I was doing all of my exercising here, it even made me more so starting to get ready for it. But for those of you that don't, and if you live at sea level, you definitely got to take that into consideration. So if there's nowhere close to you that you can go and work to get yourself some of that experience in climbing in that elevation, then think about that when you're planning. Because maybe what you need to do is, if you can't train in that, maybe you just need to plan to come a little earlier and have a couple days to get acclimated to the altitude. So come spend a couple days in Denver, before you even get on trail. And then when you do get on trail, cut your mileage back a bit than what you may normally be able to do. If you know that you can normally do, say, 12 or 14 miles a day, or that's your plan, or even as crazy as us as 18 and 20 miles a day, do about half of that for the first 2 days to, the first week, because you're going to need time to get used to that altitude, because that's a part of one of the training things that you're not being able to do in your training. And so, to keep that in mind whenever you get on the trail. But then, so I increased my training past just the hiking. I started even running, which I'm not a really big fan normally of running. But, when you're limited in time, because you get off work and maybe I don't have time before I got to get dinner ready for the family or whatever, to go and do a 9-mile hike each day. So I started going, okay, well, what's a way I can increase my cardio and increase my strength training a little bit on some of that? So I would just start going for short jogs in the neighborhood, or if I was out on a work event where I had to travel for work and I was away from being able to hike in familiar places, I'd just take and go for a short run and do a 2 or 3 mile run on that. So that was another way I increased my endurance as well on that. And then to add into that, the other thing that I did was I started getting out and backpacking, and I would start doing weekends and shakedown trips. You go and do a weekend. I'd take Willa out, my English Springer Spaniel, and start getting her used to being in a tent. You just don't want your first to be when you're going out for a through hike for that. And so I was testing gear. I was testing to make sure I had my packing down right and my packing lists accurate and different things on those weekend trips. And I even, would take, like one of the last weekend trips I did, I got one of my neighbors and I said, hey, look, my only goal is to really get out there and do a hard day of like 15, 16 miles and just see how my body feels on that, see how long, when do I get to camp, how do I recover from it, how do I feel the next day. So that was one of the last things I did in my my shakedown. Because I'll tell you, on the Colorado Trail, and it's not just a simple, easy trail that you're going out on. I mean, you can sit here at home and say, I'm used to, getting out and I can do 20 miles on a flat surface any day. But you get out and you now start climbing mountains and coming down mountains, you're going to realize real quick, like that those miles are a lot more strenuous on your muscles and, and on your joints than they would have been before. So get ready for it, plan for that. On it. And so to me, a lot of those kind of things, so with the extreme diet and with the extreme exercise that I kind of put myself through for those 4 months, I managed to lose 30 pounds before we even got on the trail, which was super amazing to me. My goal was originally 20, but it just really worked out really well for me to be able to do that. And so I was super excited and ready to be on the trail and thought that, hey, I got this. This is going to be good. But I mean, even after getting out there, I'll tell you, after being out on the trail for 23 days, and especially, because Liam and I, we got out, we were doing really well. So we set some pretty big goals, and we were doing anywhere from, I think our average was somewhere around 19 to 20 miles a day. But we had some days where we did 24 miles. We had a day where we did 26 miles. So we had some pretty high mileage days. And I tell you, I felt it. I got out there, my ankles, my knees, other things would be sore each day. Your hips from wearing the backpack, could be sore. I actually too, I found that one of the things I didn't do real well in training for was the really steep downhill. When you're really looking at, 400 to 500 foot of elevation loss per mile, that's just a strong amount of steepness in there. And it's, especially in the Rocky Mountains where the trails can be pretty rocky, that's tough on you. I mean, I ended up getting a couple of shin splints throughout the 23 days. Luckily, they were spread out differently on different feet throughout the time. But it still was very physically taxing, for me at my age, doing that many miles each day. So for me, getting ready, definitely, like if I wouldn't have done all the things that I would have done to get ready, I'd have never been able to finish that trail. Even doing the things that I did, there were still times where I thought, am I going to be able to get through on this? So definitely pre-work, do some training and stuff to get yourself ready to do the through hikes as you go. So category number 3, take care of your feet. So it kind of falls in alignment with what I was saying there, with my ankles. Your feet, you learn, and I've always known in all my years of backpacking that your feet are one of your number one priorities when you're out on the trail. One of the biggest things that will pull people from the trail, whether they're through hiking or even on a weekend hike, is issues with their feet. That could be blisters, sprained ankles, shin splints if bad enough, different things. There's just a lot of stuff that could really cause you to have issues. And even for me, I mean, like I said, I've got a lot of experience and spent a lot of time finding really good gear, and I love my hiking boots. I mean, I know some people are, trail runners, but for me, I've got weak ankles. I always worry about twisting ankle or something, especially in the rocky conditions. So I'm a big fan of kind of the hiking boots thing. Love my hiking boots, had them, this is the second pair of the same brand that I've had for so long. Probably will continue as long as they keep making them, buying the same ones, because I just love them. Never had a blister in them before the trail. Got 2 or 3 days into the Colorado Trail, had some blisters. Because, I mean, I've never in my history done 19, 20 miles a day regularly like that. And so my problem, and that's where I hope that you learn from my mistake, was that I didn't pay enough attention to my feet in the beginning, like I tell people all the time. I mean, I go out on scout trips and I'm always telling these scouts, check your feet, check your feet, check your feet. For me, the issue that I had in the beginning was that, the bottom of my feet were kind of feeling tender, which is not an uncommon thing, for me out on the trail, especially, like I said, in these rocky conditions that you get in the Rocky Mountains. You step on those rocks long enough, the bottom of your feet start to get a little tender. But I've never had a blister on the bottom of my foot before. And so for me, the mistake I made was I just kind of ignored that in those first couple of days. And I wasn't checking my feet like I was telling Liam to do and other stuff, because in my mind I was thinking, no, it's just the soreness from stepping on all the rocks. But I finally checked my feet about 3 days in, and sure enough, I had a couple blisters, and they were kind of at the bottom of my toe, which is why I was getting the sensation of the hot spot was on the bottom of my feet, but it didn't feel like it was next to my toes, so I really wasn't concerned at the time. But luckily for me, one of my planning things that we did was we made sure we had the right first aid gear and stuff with us. So I built a lot of my own first aid kit stuff, which maybe one of these days I'll make a video for to show that. But I have quite a few things in there that are very helpful. And one of those things that I swear by when backpacking is Leukotape. So you'll find that typically in your sporting sections. It's basically an athletic tape. It's super amazing preventative tape, and to me, I swear by it with through hiking. But I also carry with me moleskin because I'm a big fan of moleskin, especially if a blister is already formed. Leukotape is really, really great for preventative. If you just got a hot spot or you just notice that you got a place rubbing, it's a great way to add a layer between your feet and whatever it is that it might be rubbing against. But the moleskin really does a lot better when dealing with an actual blister itself, and helping give a little bit of cushion and kind of protect that blister while it heals, kind of thing. So for me, when I got those blisters, one of the things too that you'll see, so a lot of information out on the web about what you do with a blister, and if you were at home, I would probably normally tell you, just like most do, don't pop it, let it heal, so forth and so on. But when you're through hiking and you got to be on your feet every day, for me, I've always learned it's best to to deal with it right then. So I pop the blister, get out most of the liquid, and then I secure the blister and try to get some moleskin on. And if I can, I want to make sure I get some antibiotic ointment, or something to make sure it doesn't get infected, because that's a big issue that you potentially could run into if you're popping a blister early. And so I would get that on there and then secure the moleskin, because sometimes moleskin, the issue that you have is it doesn't always like to stay on some of those areas like a blister because of the raised skin and then the other portions that you might have for that. So I then would take the moleskin and then wrap it a little bit in some of the Leukotape. Before it was all said and done, within the first few, 3 or 4 days, I ended up having Leukotape on pretty much most of my feet, just because I kind of got nervous after that first couple of days. I'm like 3 days in and I already got blisters and got 20 more days to go. And so if I even begin to thought I felt a hot spot, I was putting Leukotape on my toes. And then I just kind of left it on there, made sure they stayed clean as best I could. And then I would change it out about every 5, 6, 7 days or so. I'd take it off, check the blisters, make sure they were clean again, put some more antibiotic cream on it, and then wrap things back up if need be for that. And so just did that the whole way, and actually ended up not having any more blisters along the way. And even by the time we got home, the blisters that had originally started were healed, at least underneath, and a lot of the skin was starting to peel off from the blister before as well. So definitely take care of your feet. Make sure you have things like, your hiking poles. Make sure, whether you're using trail runners or you're using boots, make sure that you're familiar with them. Another thing that, I had heard a lot of people talk about in some of my research that I didn't take in consideration was a lot of people talk about upsizing your shoe size by half a size before going on a through hike. I really wish I'd heard that a little better beforehand and thought about that, but I didn't, because I had such great success with my boots that I didn't do it. But I really think that was probably one of the big factors for me, was that when you're hiking as many miles as we were hiking a day and you're doing it every single day, your feet are going to swell, and giving your feet a half a shoe size to be able to swell into can be very beneficial for a lot of folks. So I know I've heard a lot of through hikers talk about that. I wish I would have done that. So I would definitely tell you to think about that, and consider that, as you're going into your own through hike as well. So definitely for me, we got lucky, or I got very lucky in the sense that even though I had challenges along the way with some blisters and some shin splints and some other things, I knew enough to set good stretching routines, to take every advantage I could when we were camping near creeks to put my feet in those icy kind of waters and just ice my ankles, massage your ankles each day. We were stretching 3 times a day. We got up in the mornings, we had a nice 10-15 minute routine of stretching that we'd do in the mornings. We'd stop for our long lunches. We would stretch before we got back on the trail from lunch, and then every afternoon we were stretching also after getting to camp. So those kind of things are the things that helped me make it to the end. Because I tell you, about a week in, I wasn't certain whether or not I was going to make it because of some of these things. But very luckily, between being preventative enough to have good first aid gear, but then also knowing how to handle it and treat it along the way helped as well. So for you have to kind of assess your own self. I'm not telling you to, if you get a shin splint or you get a twisted, or something issue on your ankle, that you shouldn't, come off trail for any of that. You just really have to kind of assess where your capabilities are for yourself and know where that is. I mean, I've known plenty of people, and if the shin splints would have been a little worse, those were the closest thing I think that came to getting me. But because I was able to do some of the massage and soak them a lot, they were able to heal pretty quick, and I was able to just slow my pace down for a day or so and get through it. So good thing for me. All right, so category number 4 is drink water and eat trail snacks. You think that's weird that I got to make it that a category of a lesson learned, but I tell you what, it's really easy to get out there. And if even for myself, on average, we were estimating that we were burning about 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day. We really were only taking in and eating probably 2,500 to 3,500 calories a day, not counting some of our splurge days. And so, we knew that you're going to have a little bit of a caloric deficit, as you go through. But, at the same time, I found in that first week that I was even having a worse of one at first, because I just didn't find myself hungry at first. We got out there and you're so excited to be out on the trail, and you're just really got a lot of energy coming into it from that excitement. And so we would get going through, and then come to find out, like we'd eat breakfast in the morning. We'd get up, and after we broke camp, we typically ate a cold breakfast. Some mornings we did do a warm breakfast with some oatmeal, or Liam did some pancakes a couple times. But for the most part, we really enjoyed the most of just a simple, easy, we would do like a granola bar, or some fig bars, or even some granola or something like that in the mornings. And then I'd find myself a lot of times we'd get on trail, and then we'd hike through, and you just get so caught up into hiking and enjoying the views and all this other stuff that next thing you know, you didn't eat, and you get to lunch and you're starving at lunch, and you're stopping because you're hungry. And then you'd eat a big, semi-lunch, and then you get back on the trail again, and before you knew it, you were at camp, and you were setting camp up, and you were starving for dinner. So, for me, let's talk first about, the water aspect of things. When you're out, and you're putting that many miles a day on the trail, you're going to be losing a lot of water, especially in the environment of Colorado, where we have such a dry and non-humid environment, where you may sweat a little bit on the trail, but you're not sweating nearly as much as you may in other places. And so therefore you're thinking, oh, if I'm not sweating, I'm not losing water that much, but you are. I mean, a lot of it's evaporating off your body, as it's coming out. And so you really need to focus on making sure you're drinking enough water. The nice thing about the Colorado Trail is it's got a lot of water, especially on years like this year, where we had a lot of snowpack this last year. So there was still snow at some of the higher elevations. So a lot of your seasonal springs were still flowing pretty heavy because there was still snow melting. So you didn't have to really go far to be able to have water. So you didn't have to carry a ton necessarily on you, because we all know one of the things that we backpackers hate to carry the most is water, because it's heavy. But Liam and I typically carried, on average, 2 smart water bottles each in our backpacks. And so we would typically have about 2 liters on us at any given time. And we tried to keep it that way. There's plenty of areas where we probably could have gone to only having about 1 liter at a time, especially if you had like, some squeeze filter systems that you were using on your bottles where you could just fill up a dirty bottle and then toss your filter on it and keep going. You could probably do that if you really wanted to, but we just tried to keep about 2 liters at any given time on us. And so typically throughout the day, I would, I'd get up in the mornings, I'd drink a little bit with breakfast and stuff, but then we'd fill our water bottles up if we were close to a water source. And then I would try to always drink at least 1 liter before lunch. Sometimes I actually drink more than that, depending on how hot the morning started off to be. And then I would make myself drink a whole liter at lunch. And a lot of times I would take then and put electrolytes and other things in my bottle there too to help give me a little bit back of that salt and those electrolytes that the body's losing with that water usage as you're going out. And then I would typically, we'd fill up our water bottles again at lunch because most times we tried to stop around a water source for lunch so that you were filtering and eating at the same time. And then I would always try to drink another liter before we got to camp. Some days, like I said, depending on how hot the afternoon was, I'd drink 2. But then we would get to camp, and while at camp, I would always try to force myself to drink at least 1 liter, if not 2, in the afternoons with dinner and before we went to bed. So on average, I would say I was putting down 5 to 6 liters a day, easily, if not more than that, maybe even as much as 7 or 8 on some days. But definitely a big key that you need to be watching for when you're out on the trail is watching how often you're going to the bathroom. If you're not peeing, then you're not drinking enough water, and you got to really be careful about that. Dehydration can be a really big thing. It's probably one of the second biggest things too to help people come off trail, dehydration and altitude issues. So just really make sure you know where your water sources are. Have something like the Far Out app, or your data book to be able to help you know where those water sources are, so you can kind of plan around them and plan your lunches and even camps if you can around water, and just make sure you're doing enough. There were some times, there was only about 3 times, maybe 4 at the most, that we had to dry camp. So we did carry the capability between both Liam and I to carry an extra 4 liters of water outside of the 4 that we were already carrying on a daily basis for when we had to dry camp. And the reason why we carried that much with us to dry camp is because I didn't want to have to ration on water. I wanted to make sure that I was still drinking water when we were at camp. And so by carrying an extra 4 liters and making sure our 4 liters were full, which would give us a total of 8 liters between the 2 of us, it really allowed me to be able to still try to drink a full liter once I got to camp, have water for our dehydrated foods, and then still have a little bit of water in the mornings to be able to fill up the bottles after drinking for breakfast and stuff as well. You could definitely tell some of the thru hikers who were not carrying as much water when they did their dry camps. The first thing they were doing every morning was searching for that first water source because they had rationed out. They didn't drink a whole lot the night before, and then they were trying to ration their water and so that they wouldn't run out before getting to that first water source a few miles in or so sometimes. And so, for me, I didn't want to be doing that rationing, so we carried a little extra for that. And so, you'd have a little extra weight, but it was definitely worth it when we got to camp. And then lastly, the 5th category is, really after being out on trail for so long, it's take your time. I started learning a really good motto, I think, when I was out on trail that I started saying about halfway in, which was live the trail. We met a lot of people throughout the trail, different ages, doing different things. Like as I mentioned, many of you guys, like me, we were on a time crunch. So therefore, we're trying for these higher miles. And because we were physically being able to do them, we were sore. Yeah, we had some times, but we got up every day. We felt fresh every day, and we would do it again. We kind of were gluttons for punishment a little bit and pushing ourselves to that. so that we could complete. My recommendation to you would be, if you're really trying to plan for this, I know we all have jobs. We all have that issue with trying to take off enough time to be able to go out on the trail. But if I had it to do over again, I'd probably still do, the weekends ahead of time to kind of cut some time for that. But I would have asked for 5 or 6 days more off from work, and really just took my time a little more, so that I didn't have to feel pressured to, to do 19 to 20 miles each day. For me, I would have loved to have seen an average of, doing 15 to 16 as the peak for each day. I think that would have just been a little bit nicer and easier on the body. Maybe you wouldn't be hurting, nearly as much as we probably did coming along. And you can also take a lot more time on the trail to just really enjoy yourself. I mean, we did stop at times. I would always stop and turn and look and try to take in the views and do that kind of stuff. But and then we'd take long lunches and try to do that in places that we really wanted to enjoy and experience. But we didn't, there were a lot of people along the trail that I met that, they come across a pretty spot, they just sit for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and really just take it in. I was very envious of some of that, and especially too, we met some amazing people who were in their 60s and 70s doing the trail, and, and they they know their limitations probably better than some of us folks that are pushing ourselves, and they were doing, an average 12-mile days, and some of them even less, I think they were doing some 8 to 12-mile days, and, they were stopping at camp at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon sometimes, and you just really, you could tell that they were enjoying and they were getting a different experience on the trail than say we were. They had a lot longer time to run across people, and then they would camp with different folks, which we did too as well sometimes. But then they were at camp a little longer and they could have more stories and conversations with folks. And so you really got to just live the trail a little more. So for me, and definitely in hindsight for us, like we didn't do any 0 days. We did two half days along the way. In hindsight, if it was me, so if you count the weekends, we did the whole trail in say 28 days. I would definitely add another week to that and make it more like 34 days or so, because I think setting the pace, like I said, to a little bit more reasonable pace, and then also about every 5th or 6th day taking a 0 day would have just gone so much more along the ways of making it even that much more enjoyable. Don't get me wrong, we loved and had a blast along the way, but it definitely, by the time we got into our last 7 days on the trail of really pushing ourselves that much and knowing that we still had to push ourselves, that we didn't really have any options in the last 7 days to take any 0 days based off of our plan that we had to be off trail by a certain day, it definitely made it a little bit harder for it. And so take your time, get out there and just really go and live the trail. There's just so many cool things to do, especially, if you're in Colorado, we got so many awesome mountain communities out there that are close to the mountain trails, that all of these folks that, had so many amazing stories that went and zeroed in some of those towns, like Breckenridge, Twin Lakes, Silverton, a lot of these other places and stuff along the way, are just really awesome, and go check them out. I even got to talk to a couple folks who went in and zeroed in Leadville, and it just happened to be around the 4th of July, and they got to go to an amazing, barbecue that Leadville was all putting on and got free hot dogs and hamburgers. It's just like we were totally jealous of that one. But take your time, get out there and really just, enjoy it. This is a once in a lifetime thing that many of you guys are doing. There's few folks, granted I did meet a couple people on the way that this was their 3rd or 4th time doing the Colorado Trail. But for some of us, it may be the only time you're going to go do it, and this may be a lifetime goal for you. And so for me, take the time, beg, plead, work, do whatever you have to do. For those that were young, I met quite a few folks that were younger and, maybe they weren't into a full career like some of us, older folks are. And so they would, when their work said, hey, you can't take off a month, and maybe they worked at, say, whether it was a restaurant or like my son works at a grocery store right now while he's going to college, they would just quit because they knew, there's enough jobs out there that I can get a job when I get back. And I want to make sure I'm taking the time to enjoy this. So I'm not telling you to quit, but I'm just telling you, talk to your work, talk to your bosses, do some pleading and begging. Make sure you take the right amount of time and go out and enjoy yourself on the trail. So that's it. I mean, those are the 5 things. I mean, we definitely learned some other things along the way. You know, there was, you know, minor things and things that you had experiences with there, but these were kind of the biggest categories when I really sat down and thought about things that I really think that it would have been nice to hear some of these when I was doing some of my pre-planning. So the biggest things that I wanted to share for there. I've got some more videos coming out here soon. I'm going to do a video on gear after the fact. Like, you know, I did a gear one before the fact, talking about what I was taking on it. Now I'm going to sit down at some point and talk about after doing it, what did I send back along the way? What did I wish, you know, that I had that I didn't have? What did I love and was so glad that I had, you know, and do some of that. And so we're going to do some of those, talk about a few other videos. I've got a few more ideas for some videos for the Colorado Trail topics before we leave this topic altogether. But I've also got quite a few things that's going to be coming up in the year as well. So if you've enjoyed watching us along this trip, feel free to subscribe because I got more things coming. I mean, you know, for me, it's all about backpacking here with the Backpacking Scouter and getting outdoors and teaching folks how to do that. Whether you're a beginner and you're starting off in the beginning of trying to get into the sport, or you're actually been doing it for a while. I mean, I try to give advice, you know, on all the things that I can think of to be able to help you guys be able to go out and have a blast when you're out there. I'm even looking this winter at really starting to get back out. I've done over my 30 years tons of backpacking in the 3-season time frame, but not done a ton necessarily in the winter, even though I've kind of wanted to for many, many years. There's just not a lot of folks when you want to ask a friend to come out and go backpacking with you during the winter when it's snowing, that want to get out and do some of that. So I finally have decided, you know what, I'm just going to go start doing some of it on my own. Bought a hot tent and a lightweight backpacking stove lately, and so going to try some of that out this winter. So some really cool things coming up that we're going to be here to share with you guys. So I really appreciate those of you that followed us along the way and along the journey and that have joined us here and following the channel. So thanks for everybody that's what you've been doing, and I hope, you know, feel free to give me some comments, you know, in the chat below. What were some of the lessons that you learned on your through hike if you've done it recently, or even you know, if you've done a long backpacking trip, what were some lessons that you learned? Or, you know, feel free to let me know some of the things you guys would like to see, you know, as we go forward, and, you know, other questions that you might have to help better your backpacking you know, times and, you know, getting out, whether that's gear or it's, you know, just other things that you might have questions on. But feel free to comment, like and subscribe, and get to see some of the future content as we move along. But outside of that, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you guys in on the next ones. Have a great day.